Hello, and welcome. Today we're going to learn how to play Count 'em Up. This is a really fun game that can be used to teach children kind of how to work with coins, and we're going to see that they work with the American denominations of coins, and it can just be a fun also way to just play with your friends and talk while you swap points around and see who can beat each other by the end of the game. So as far as dealing goes, everybody gets 5 cards at the beginning of the game, so you just deal those out. The game is over when the draw pile is exhausted. So whenever that last card is taken, that's the end of the game. You count up how many points you have at that point, and whoever's the most wins. So how do we keep track of points? Well, we have chips. And they're each worth a different amount of monies. This is what's helping kids kind of learn how to count this way. So the red ones are worth 1 point. So they're basically our pennies. And the blue ones are our nickels. They're worth 5 points. The yellow ones are worth 10, and the green ones are worth 25. So you're going to start out with the same amount. In the instruction booklet, it gives however much each player should have, depending on how many people you're playing with, and you should be able to use almost all the coins each time. So now we're going to begin to swap and steal and swindle each other out of these points so that someone at the end is going to be left with the most. And there might be a tie. That is a possibility. So how does that work? Well, the gameplay, first you lay down a card. So Mr. Red's going to start, and he's got a card in his hand, and it's a take 1 from all. So everybody has to give him 1 point. So they all give him 1 point, and then the end of your turn, you just pick back up to 5. And that is really it. It's that simple. Each person just plays a card, picks back up, and we react to it. So let's see what kind of cards we're working with here. Mr. Green is going to play a take 5 from 1. So there's take 1, take 5, take 10, or take 25 from either one person or everybody. So when you have a pick 1, you get to pick one person to give you that amount. So who has Mr. Green picked? Mr. Blue, to give him 5 points. And he picks back up. And it's Mr. Yellow's turn. He's got a go again. So a go again, you lay that down, and then you can play 2 cards after that. So you basically get 2 turns right in a row. So for his first turn, he's going to take 25 from 1. So who is that going to be? Mr. Red. And it's important also to realize if Mr. Red didn't have any green ones, he could, of course, pay with 2 yellows and a blue, or 2 yellows and 5 ones, or 5 reds, or any combination that he can. The one issue that you might come across is that you can't make exact change. So whenever that happens, you can't make exact change. The person who is taking from you does not give you change in return. They don't make change. You just end up having to give them a few extra points. So that's part of the game as well. So then he's going to play once more because he played that go again. Take 10 from all. So everybody's going to give him 10 points. And then he's going to pick back 3 cards. So he's back to 5 at the end of his turn. Now Mr. Blue has got a pass to the left. So everybody is going to pass to the left. That works out really well for Mr. Blue. Not so much for some of the other players here. So let's see what happens as they're passing their chips around. And this is what everyone settles with at the end. So Mr. Blue picks back up. And it's Mr. Red's turn again. He's got a swap. So there's pass to the left, pass to the right. There's also swaps. So he's going to pick an opponent and swap with them. So he's going to swap with Mr. Blue. Good for Mr. Red. And pick back up. So what we got here from Mr. Green is a take half. So take half the points from whoever has the most chips. So at this point, everybody's going to have to count how many chips they have. Not necessarily how many points they have. It doesn't matter what it's worth, but how many chips they have. So I'll tell you, Mr. Red has 29 chips. So he's the most chips, but they are worth 79 points. So Mr. Green is going to take half of those 79 points. Now that's an odd number, so we round down. So half of 78, he's going to take 39 points from Mr. Red. So this is that moment where kids, or even you, are going to have to think about what are each of these coins worth and count them up. And this doesn't happen frequently in the game, but it happens a few times throughout the game because you go through the whole deck. And so it allows them to have these opportunities to think about what are these worth and how do I use math to think about that. So that's really good. Pick back up. And it's Mr. Yellow's turn. He's going to play a skip. So this skips whoever's supposed to go next, which would be Mr. Blue. So Mr. Blue doesn't get a turn. So it's Mr. Red's turn now. And he's got to count them up. So now an opponent, he gets to pick, must give him the point equivalent of how many chips they have. So now it doesn't matter what the points are worth, but it matters how many there are. So he's going to pick Mr. Green. And I'll tell you, Mr. Green had 34 chips. So he gave him 34 points in chips. And then he picks back up. And Mr. Green has got a take 25 from all. So everybody's going to have to give him 25. But what is this? Mr. Yellow has a not today. Now, not today, you can refuse whatever an opponent has told you to do. So Mr. Yellow doesn't have to pay because he had his not today card. So they both pick up. So they have 5. And now it's Mr. Yellow's turn. He's going to pass to the right. Everybody's going to pass back to the right. Just going to be useful. Oh, but Mr. Green had a not today. So now just those other 3 players that are still in play are going to pass their chips around. Mr. Green doesn't have to be a part of it. So that might turn into a swap if you're not careful, if enough people have not todays. So now he's picked back up. Mr. Blue has got a take 25 from 1, and he's going to ask that from Mr. Red. But Mr. Red has a not today, so he's going to say no. But Mr. Blue also has a not today, so Mr. Blue is going to not today the not today. So after all that, poor Mr. Red actually does have to give him his 25 points, and they pick back up. And so as you can see, the game is pretty simple. You just do have to do some counting with the chips, but that's kind of a secondary part of playing with the cards. And so this helps kids just get their fingers on these chips that are worth 4 different amounts and kind of think about that a little bit. And it can be a fun game for adults as well. So that is how to play Count 'em Up.